Well, in keeping with ADBN TV's coverage of legislative activities on both floors of the red and the green chambers at the National Assembly, we'll be bringing to you a broadcast on yesterday's coverage of the tax reform bills later today. And come the 26th to 28th, as the discussions grip the floor of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, we'll also do our best to keep you informed. Now, in moving on, we'll be joined by Seun Oni in a few as we look at the issues in the news. We're hopeful that his connection will allow for a smooth conversation this morning. And if we do have that connection up, let's say good morning to Seun Oni as we welcome him to join the conversation. Good morning to you, Seun.
Brian, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Well, it's wonderful to have you join us this morning, Mr. Seun. First things first, we hear that, of course, the ex-CBN governor's lawyers are accusing Justice Oshod of being biased in the case, of course, indicting the ex-CBN governor over 4 point something million US dollars. Now, they're demanding that Justice Oshod should hands off the case. What do you make of this? Is this the normal accusation of, the accused and his defense of being, of the judge or the person in charge of the case being biased?
Chijoke, good morning. Uh, when I read the news yesterday, immediately my instant reaction was that I was shell-shocked that up to now we've not seen Emefiele on stretcher.
Yeah.
We have not seen him apply that he'll be traveling abroad because he has a terminal ailment that just came up in course of his prosecution. So I think it's one of the tactics that goes with prosecuting high-profile people in Nigeria. It's not new. If they don't go the way of a comical displays in court, they go through their counsels. And so since the counsel had accused the judge, that sometimes one of the very funny statements he made was that sometimes someone can be overtly or covertly biased, and that he put it to the judge that they are seeing some semblance of bias in his line of questioning.
Yeah.
So it's left for the judge to stand his ground because it's his court, and he determines how the rules are applied in the interest of justice.
Now, this demands being made by Emefiele's counsel for the removal of the judge from the case. How possible is this? Can a counsel just demand that a judge be taken off the case? If you remember the case, the issue of Nnamdi Kanu and, of course, Justice Nyako, he has been crying that she should be taken off the case, but that has not happened up until now. Do you think that perhaps there might be any of such incidents taking place?
It's not a new thing for councils to request for a change in whosoever is sitting as justice over their case. But I think the Justice Binta Yako's incidents that you cited is a bit different because Justice Binta Yako actually wrote and actually was the one who wrote that she was going to step down from Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's case, but somehow he came back again, was reinstated again, and that's why I think Kanu has actually been insisting that he must keep to his words and recuse herself. In this case also, you must know that even though the lawyer writes, they will write to the NJC, but it's at the NJC's prerogative or the head of the court. In this case, if it's a high court, the head of the high court, if it is the court of appeal, the president of the court of appeal also has that discretion to determine whether, look at the fact, the evidence adduced, if they are weighty enough to determine whether the judge in this case will step down or not. So let's see if they will go the long haul, because it's one thing to say that in court, it's another thing to back it up right to the statutory agency that has the responsibility to sanction or to take a decision. So let's see if they will match action with match their words with action. So that's what we'll be looking up to in the coming days.
Now, Mr. Shehu, does it somewhat worry you that the credibility of the judiciary always comes into question, especially with high-profile cases, but more so when you find out that it is two senior advocates handling this case on behalf of Mr. Godwin Emefiele making such weighty allegations?
Well, I have and like every other Nigerian, we still have a long way to go with our judiciary. But in this case, in this contest, I really think nothing is at stake with the integrity of the judiciary here. We know how these things work in Nigeria. If it were to be a poor person that was before this court and who cannot afford the services of the learned Sikh, the learned SANs, you might not see this back and forth. It's always a straight jacket. Your fate is sealed, whether you are guilty or you are not guilty. Within a few periods, your case will be determined. But where you have this retinue of SAN on both sides, you always expect legal fireworks. They were paid heavily to ensure that their client, in this case, the EFCC on one side, usually represented by Kemi Keshinro SAN, and on the other side also another learned SAN. So you expect that type of fireworks, and it's not anything new. We see it every day. We hear and read about it every day. So where you have them on two sides, they will throw everything possible. When that is not working, sometimes you see subtle blackmail the way we have just seen.
Well, I guess we would find out tomorrow, as Justice Oshod has fixed February 26 as the date to continue on the ruling, following the application to recuse himself of the case. But then again, let's move on to other issues in the news this morning. Now, away from the Emefiele gates, another issue greeting conversations was the commencement of public hearing on the tax reform bills yesterday at the floor of the Red Chambers, and stakeholders, proponents, opponents greeted the discussion. It was important to hear that the Arewa think tank have actually changed position on the allegations that the bill was against the North. But all of that was also greeted with the rejection for an incremental increase in the value added tax, which is part of the proponents of the four bills that make up the tax reform bills before the National Assembly. What do you make of these developments, Mr. Sheung?
Brian, you could recall that we had several engagements on the tax reform bill. And one of the points I made was that in spite of the position of the Governors Forum, the position of a number of other stakeholders, that it was really not cast in stone. So I was not surprised when the public hearing started yesterday, and we are now seeing what you call fine details of the various positions. It's unexpected, and I think I'm happy. I think Nigerians should see it as a welcome development because the beauty of the public hearing process of the National Assembly is to ensure that people who have differing opinions come and actually state their own position. Eventually, Nigeria will be the winner. The tax reform bill will be better after these conversations. And of course, it's expected. If they give reasons why they think the tax reform bill, in this case, the Arewa Consultative Forum, and that's why we must be very careful we don't fall into clickbait. The first headline I saw was that ACF were against the tax reform bill until I started going through other news items, reading the details of their position. So they were really not against it. They actually, like you mentioned, ensure that some areas, especially the VAT, they made it very clear that they don't think it's right to go the way of incremental addition to VAT as of now, and that's a position. I think the committee that did the work also will need to convince both chambers, the red and the green chambers, why they think incremental addition to VAT is the way to go. So the National Assembly committees, having looked at these various positions, can now take a patriotic position for the country.
Now,
So that's the right thing.
Mr. Seun, do you think that the submissions of the Arewa Consultative Forum is to ensure that the burden of an increased tax reform bills is not thrown on the backs of Nigerians, not just the northern part of the country now, but every single Nigerian? Because if there's an increase in VAT, I don't think it will be relegated just to the northern part of the country, but somebody in Lagos, somebody in Abuja, somebody in Niger State or wherever it is will still be paying the same VAT all across board. Is this the case?
Let me pick it up from there, Chijioke. You see, when it comes to VAT, we must situate it around what we call the chain of production. And that was actually the argument of the ACF. The submission of the committee was that the VAT, for instance, which of course everyone knows is a consumer tax, all right? It comes to people who are purchasing.
Yeah.
Now, the immediate reaction of the ACF was that in one breath, the tax reform bill was trying to say, or the methodology, or rather philosophy is a better word, behind the tax reform bill is that for the first time, Nigeria will have what we call a progressive tax, or what we call sometimes, some argue that it might be a proportionate tax, where people whose earning is below 3 million per annum, for instance, will not be required to pay a certain type of tax. So the ACF is saying it's like you are taking something from one hand and you are also collecting it
with the other hand.
With the other hand, you say we are not going to pay, for instance, the usual tax that is removed from on salary and the rest of them. But when we go to make purchases, you have now increased what we pay on the as taxes on the various products we are getting. So that means even though we did not pay it, you did not remove it from our salaries, you are still removing it at the point of purchases. That was the argument, which is of course a reasonable argument. But you must see it the other way, that we are a nation that have not exhausted our tax capacity over the years, one of the lowest in the world, not just in Africa. And so that's the argument of the committee, that the reason why we are removing tax at the point of salary is so that it's not so that you are not paying anything, is that you are not paying on two fronts the way it is currently being done. You will pay on your salary. When you go to make purchases, you will still pay as VAT. So why not take it from salary and you are just paying in one place, not in two places? So it's a long argument, like I said. It is now left for National Assembly, the legislatures, to determine the best thing for Nigerians.
Well, Mr. Seun, some of the suggestions that the ACF had made was, one, for improved VAT collection and the formalization of the informal sector, and also utilization of digital technologies as a way of expanding the country's tax base. Let's talk about the informal sector now. We all know that individuals who mostly earn in the informal sector earn wages, not salaries. How exactly does the ACF want the government to go about taxation on the informal sector? And also in terms of digitalizing this whole tax system, I want to believe that apart from Lagos, another state, of course Lagos and the FCT here, another state that has gone really in-depthly with regards to digital collection of taxes is Nasarawa State. I can't quite remember the term, the name of the program, but it was quite a very successful one, and it's still running. So please, how do we address this? Firstly, the taxation on the informal sector, and secondly, digitalization of taxes.
That position by the ACF is not actually novel. It's something that experts have actually been canvassing for a very long time. And why we've not taken that route as a nation is still a surprising thing for me. Let me state the example of Ghana, for instance.
Yep.
In Ghana, to be a seamstress, what we call tailor in the local parlance,
Yeah.
in the other parlance, you are not just a tailor to sew for everybody. They've been able to organize their informal sector in such a way that they've graded artisans. So you have category A, category B, and stuff like that. Unlike in our country here, where I'm just citing the example of a tailor now.
Yes.
They say tailor will tell you is unisex, he can sew suit, he can, and eventually
he can
when
sew
you bring
agbada
that
and
product,
everything.
yeah,
Everything in
so
between.
it looks like a carpenter sewed for you. So on one side, it's not allowing us to be able to maximize in economics what we call economy of scale. That is, we are not competitive. There are certain things, several countries got to a point that if a product is coming from Nigeria, they will embargo it, search it, and things like that. So we must go back to organize our informal sector. Part of the organization, a few efforts have been ongoing, but it's not far-reaching yet. I think there was this program by NITDA to train artisans. But when I read the figure, the number of artisans they will train over the next 3 years, I was seeing something like 40,000. That's not far-reaching. We must organize our artisan. The advantage that we do, number one, is that we will now formalize them, all right? Which is not a difficult thing to do. You just need to go back to the third tier of government, which is the local government where these artisans are domiciled. Give them the responsibility. How can you give them this responsibility? You must ensure that this thing or these things are digitized. And that will take us to the conversation of the number of states that you mentioned that have been able to digitize their revenue collection.
Yeah.
Why it is difficult for states to digitize the revenue collection is simply because of interest. All right? You have people who oversee. Let's take the park, for instance. There are senior touts who control the various parks. And so what governments have done across a lot of states, for instance, I know of Lagos State, I know of Ekiti State, I know about a number of other states where government just liaise with these senior touts and tell them, this is the amount we want you to remit monthly or weekly. And so they control things there and
sort of like gatekeeping the revenue pool and then deciding on what to give back to the coffers of the government in the state.
Yes, but I now spoke with someone who is into revenue collection, digitizing revenue collection.
Yeah.
And he told me something, we started laughing, all of us. Government told him the amount they have agreed on a certain area to collect from the person who was in charge. And he said on the 3rd of every month, the man usually would have remitted the full sum. So that means he will take the remaining 27 days and be making money for himself and the other stakeholders.
Because a certain amount has been stipulated for him to remit.
Have been stipulated. So who is losing? Is the government. So the suggestion by ACF, like I said, is not novel. People had said, if we want to increase our revenue, we must find a way to formalize our informal sector. Number one. Number two, we must go digital. And the moment we go digital, aren't you surprised? I was in one of the hospitals, Kubwa, General Hospital, let me mention the name. And I was surprised. I wanted to pay. And they told me at the point it was a blood test I needed to do a few months ago. And I was told, no, that I can't use card. I should go and pay with I should
Cash.
go and use POS. They now directed me. They've stationed a POS person in front of their office. And I went there. Even the charges was very outrageous. And they said I should go and use my POS, bring cash. And I said, really? So an hospital in the FCT still collect cash in 2025. Those are the type of things. So eventually, how do you even guarantee that type of money will go back to government account? So those are the type of things we need to do if we are a serious country. But we are not looking like a serious people, unfortunately.
Well, some of the serious deliberations that were held on the floor of the Red Chambers vis-a-vis this rejection of the hike in VAT was also the rejection of a gradual face-off of TED Fund, Naseni and NIDA by the year 2030. Do you think that this is apt that this recommendations of the presidential panel on tax reforms and fiscal policies were rejected?
I think the conversation at the time was not facing off these agencies, was facing off the percentage of the source of taxation that goes into them. ITF, TED Fund, and a number of other government agencies like that. They were the way they were funded before was that a percentage of some designated taxes are remitted as the source of funding for these agencies. So the committees were suggesting that it should be gradually phased and eased off. So, and many people have said, if you ease it off, the committee did not suggest alternative funding. And I think that is the conversation. If we are facing off their source of funding, what are the alternatives? Because if you don't suggest the alternative, that means you are going to paralyze these agencies. Let's pick TED Fund, for instance. Major structures, infrastructures across all government-owned tertiary institutions, and I mean universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, there are times to TED Fund intervention. And I want to believe every one of you agree with this. If you actually schooled in a private institution, you will see the most imposing buildings, and several of them, they were actually built thanks to the intervention of TED Fund. If you ease them out, are we going to subject our institutions to this mediocre funding strategy in our education system, where the budget approvals that go to tertiary institution is not actually enough to do anything serious? The moment you pay salaries and you meet a number of other obligations, we will just convert our tertiary institutions into glorified secondary schools. And that is an argument that I think the National Assembly should take seriously. We must find a way to ensure that if we say this funding should be eased off, we must suggest alternative way of funding, and the funding must be minimum equivalent to at least what they are getting now, if not more than that.
Now this idea of free trade zones as well, Nasima made his position during the public hearing, and it said the imposition of taxes on what were to be statutorily free trade zones is wrong. It defies the idea of free trade zones. Do you think it was an oversight in the recommendations the committee made to impose taxes on the areas that were ought to be free trade zones?
I think largely free trade zones. I've traveled to a few countries, and when you say that a place is a free trade zone, you don't impose taxes on it, because the idea behind a free trade zone is that a lot of industrial activities will be going on there, but the products that will be coming out from there will have a bit of concessions because of the help government had given to the producers there. So we must ask ourselves, is it going to be a forward or a backward arrangement? When I say a forward arrangement, we will give you free lands. We will give you tax rebate for bringing your products and the rest of them, but we will tax your product. That is an arrangement.
Yeah.
Another arrangement will be you will pay for your machineries, you will pay for the land, But when you are going out, when you manufacture any product, we will not tax. Those are arrangements that can be made. So these things are really not cast in stones, and I'm happy. Like I've said severally on this on the Money Express, that you see the purpose of public hearings is so that we can judge and now arrive at the most economically viable, most patriotic positions in the larger interests of Nigeria. And I'm happy that's what is going on
So,
in the
so, so,
floor
Mr.
of.
Sean, technically, you agree that there can be a way around, taxing these free trade zones, even though not directly, but perhaps via the products that have been produced within those areas or are emanating from the free trade zones.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. They are business people. So even if government says we are not taxing you in the next 10 years, it doesn't mean that government will still not collect something at some point.
Yeah.
So that's the point I'm trying to make. They are not coming to dash Nigerians their product. They will sell also to make profit. So what I'm saying is that the arrangement must be such that the nation is not losing out. And it is not an arrangement that will stifle industrialization in the country. That's exactly the point I'm making.
Now, on the other angle to this conversation, it's been 4 months since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu transmitted the tax reform bills to both chambers for consideration and subsequent passage. And off the back of the commencement of the public hearing, the president again has charged the National Assembly to consider this legislative proposal and give him what will now be workable laws towards improving on Nigerians' income generation through tax. I don't know what this charge at this point is looking to do, but what do you make of this call from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu? Over the last 4 months, it's been deliberated at the National Assembly. Do you think that this comments coming at a time like this is looking to more or less sway or persuade the National Assembly to do the biddings of the executive?
If on the
On the flip side,
I'm trying to put the right words together, that on the back heel of the controversy that trailed the introduction of this tax reform, and when you are now beginning to see buy-in of stakeholders, so it's unexpected for the president to also now tell the National Assembly that, well, the major hurdles, the major constraints to this tax bill, which seems to have crossed. So the ball is now in your court. So I want you to expedite action. So that's the right comment. That's the right call. And I think if you want to say a subtle way of pushing the National Assembly, I think 100% I will agree with you.
Well, how about the submissions on the scrapping of taxation on agric equipment? Of course, this is in a bid to ensure that the agricultural sector in the country is not overburdened by taxation, which is the pillar that holds up our food security structure in the country. Do you also subscribe to this line of thoughts, in line with, of course, the Iowa think tank's submissions?
100%. For me, that's perhaps the greatest submission the ACF actually made. Don't forget that the North actually is the bastion of the nation's agric. The North depends so much on farming, and the larger percentage of the land mass of the country is actually up north. So if agric is the predominant business in that part of the nation, then government, and also I must not forget to add that a nation of over 240 million that is not self-sufficient in its food requirement, has no business imposing tax on agricultural products. The note of warning I will just sound is that we have had incidences in the past where non-farmers apply to receive tax concessions, tax exemptions under the guise of importing agricultural products, and eventually they import something else, import exotic cars and things like that. We've had those instances.
Yeah.
So we must just ensure that it is actually people who are importing agricultural machineries, inputs, and the rest of them that receive these tax exceptions, not people who are into other things, but who just receive government waivers to import these things. If we can do that, that's the greatest tonic we can give to our agricultural sector that seems to be taking it will make progress this year, and next year it goes 3, 4, 5 years backward. There was a time we were already celebrating that we are now a rice sufficient nation, we are wheat sufficient nation, but sadly today, you and I, we know that that's not true.
Yeah.
These foods are very expensive. I'm a bread person, for instance, and it doesn't show that we are a wheat sufficient country. And we really must take that part of our nation seriously, at least a minimum. We can't have this type of land and we have issue with food. And so I think it's the right call. Let machineries and all of that that are required, tractors, other farm inputs that will be brought in, let them be tax exempt. And so that way we encourage our farmers to do better. For instance, farmers are crying across the country over the hike in the price of fertilizer. And that's so sad. There was a time when we actually partnered with Morocco. I think that was during immediate President Buhari's regime. We partnered with Morocco, and we were seeing fertilizer at highly subsidized rate. What happened with that partnership? That farmers across the nation, north, south, they are all complaining that fertilizer had gone over the roof. Government needs to do something, and this call by ACF is one of those calls to remind our government that a nation that cannot feed itself is really not a serious nation when the land and everything is available for us.
Quite timely calls you have made here, Mr. Seun, and also very pertinent calls by the ACF. But yet another person that is making a very important call is the president, that is charging the Nigerian Senate to ensure that they draw up workable laws, of course, in line with the tax reform bills. In closing now, before we move on to other discussions in the news, holistically, what do you think could be a workable law that will propel the tax reform bills to heights that all Nigerians will benefit from and be thankful for?
Well, that law, I would say, would have to do with the complexities around our style of governance.
Yeah.
We are a federal system, but our federalism again is not like the US that we copied. The federalism in the United States, for instance, recognizes only the 2 tiers, the federal government and the states. But in Nigeria, our own federalism captures 3 tiers of government: the federal, the state, and the local government. And don't forget that the tax reform is actually was conceptualized to help drive the tax not just at the federal level, at the state and at the local government. And so a workable law, in my opinion, we have to do with a law that will not create another problem in its effort to solving one problem. You know, for so many years, the revenue allocation formula had become contentious. It has become so contentious that sometimes state government will actually take the federal government to court. And we have incidences like that. So I think calling National Assembly that they have to think through to ensure that the local government, the federal, the state, they are all put all considered in course of making this law, so that you will not make law and eventually Supreme Court that will determine who gets what. In my opinion, I think that's exactly the idea of a workable law. Make a law that will not become contentious thereafter. Let it be. Let it capture the interests of the federal, the state, and the local government.
Now, whilst most commendations are given in terms of legislative interventions that can better the lot of any nation, Nigeria has been faulted for not conducting an important exercise to help it plan in line with its ever-growing population. It's been 19 years since the last national population census and housing demarcation exercise. Despite funds being provided for and the then erstwhile President Muhammadu Buhari administration looking to conduct it just before the 2023 general elections, conversations are on when this census would hold. We ought to have had directors from the NPC here in the studio this morning, but they pulled out on short notice. It almost feels as though this is a touchy subject anytime it looks to be discussed. What do you make about this delay in conducting our next census?
Thank you, Brian. I've written a number of opinions, a number of our editorial as a paper. We've written a number of editorials on the imperative of Nigeria conducting a census. And I must clearly say it here, that one of the reasons why we had struggled implementing what we actually thought were well, thoroughly planned policies and programs of government had been largely, not just in part, had been largely due to a verifiable figure for our planning. Let me start from the social security programs by successive administration. The reason why it has failed. Money will be released, meant for the poorest of the poor in society, and this money will go around the rich of the richest in society, because we really don't have data. Plans by government to the inflation, what's it called? The fuel subsidy removal. The reason why it was just removed by fiat was because we don't have data to know who consumes what and where are they domiciled. So you pick any subject at all, our health is in comatose today because we really have not planned well. There are parts of this country where the maternal mortality level is so scary. And guess what? Doctors who are qualified to handle those incidences, they are posted elsewhere. All right? For instance, in the FCT here, some of the best government facilities, they are in the heart of town, where most people there won't attend those type of hospitals. I told someone, some of the hospitals we built in certain part of Abuja, the people who reside around that place, they don't go to government hospitals. Some of them, if they have a headache, they will fly to Germany, fly to US, fly to the UK. But the satellite towns where you require this type of facilities, go there. There was a period when I needed to do eye check. I started having a bit of issue with my eye, so I needed to go to the hospital. I went there on 4 occasions. On the 4 occasions, I pulled out. I had to go to a private clinic for my check. Number one, the queue I saw, there was a day I went there, they gave me a list and I was number 162, and I got there before 8 a.m. and I was 162. So I just told myself, you mean I will line up here as 162? So when will I leave the hospital? So I just backed out and I did not go back there again. So these issues have become persistent because we don't have a census. We don't know the number of people who need XYZ services. So I'm one of the people who believes that this is an exercise that we don't need to delay again. when I saw the headline that the president was meeting with the commission yesterday, I was so excited. I was expecting that the press statement that will be coming out is that we now have a date for census. But when I heard again that president is planning to form a committee, please, why
Now,
should it take
now,
forever to set up a committee to
Mr.
plan the
Sean,
census?
as part of items listed, delaying the next census, or that has delayed the next census for about 19 years or so, will be the issue of insecurity and, of course, the onset of COVID-19. Now, of course, also mentioned were budget constraints and political transitions. Now, my major concern will be the budget constraints and these political transitions. If Nigeria could organize elections every 4 years, people go to the polls and exercise their civil franchise, even in war-torn areas like Borno State, terrorist in infiltrated areas and places that many people might think are too dangerous. But yet, during elections, people go out and vote, and yet the NPC continues to cite insecurity, lack of budget, and of course, political reasons or transitions as the reason why it has not conducted census for almost 2 decades. Should we really believe this coming from the NPC?
Chijoke, you asked me a question and it seems subtly you have actually answered your question. Uh, even the most war-ravaged or terrorism-ravaged, I think that's the right term, the terrorism-ravaged areas, they have senators, rep members, House of Assembly members voted in on election days.
Yeah.
Insecurity usually don't stop elections. That day, funny enough, they will hold election. There was one election like that. I tried to rack my brain while you were talking, but I can't pick it. But I know it happened in Borno when the INEC chairman, he called a meeting, called a press conference, and he says their staff, some people were shooting. They were at the top of a hill, and they were shooting in the direction where election was being conducted on that day. That they will have to go and re-strategize. So they shifted the election by 1 week. And the following week, the military were deployed there to ensure that election was conducted. I'm just telling you scenarios because that election was a priority to them. The election then was a priority. And the next election, even if there is still terrorism anywhere, they will still hold election because it's a priority. The reason why we have not had our census, apart from COVID-19, and of course, COVID-19, before COVID-19, we ought to have had our census. After COVID-19, we ought to have had our census. So all those excuses listed there, not a single one is germane enough to stop us from holding our census for the past 19 years. Statutorily, we were supposed to be holding census at least every decade, every 10 years.
Yeah.
So we are entering into a second decade without a census. And it showed in our planning and in our implementation as a country.
Well, moving on, let's also look at another accompanying issue in the news, and delving away from socio-economic issues as another political debate. Yesterday, we began it in our studio only to see some of the headlines in that direction. People are talking about the need for separations of power. And whilst many had applauded the National Assembly for standing down the ministerial nomination of the ex-Kaduna Governor El-Rufai, this morning he is being captured following a television appearance saying that it wasn't indeed the Senate who stood down his ministerial nomination, but that the president dabbled in it. He's also fingered the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, as one who is plotting his political demise. Let's get your position on this revelation as made by Malam El-Rufai.
It's good for me to state this very clear, that the trending topic about the former minister, former governor of Kaduna State, and every other person, the president, the NSA, and every other character, Obasa, the governor of Kaduna State, that he mentioned their names on set yesterday, can be likened to a chess player pawns on the chessboard and the chessboard itself. Politicians like El-Rufai had turned Nigeria into a chessboard. Nigerians are the pawns on the chessboard, and the chess players are the politicians. Everything he said yesterday, there is nothing about Nigeria, there is nothing about Nigerians there. It's about I, me, I. And I'm talking about someone, he admitted he was minister about 20 years ago. He's been privileged 8 years, 2 terms governor of Kaduna State. And the president himself, we can begin to trace history. 92, senator, governor 1999, up till he spent 8 years as well. He's now in the saddle. And you still see them, whenever they don't get a position, you see them suddenly they become analysts, they become advocates, as if they know what they are doing. And I just pity people who take them serious. I really don't take our politicians seriously again, because nothing really suggests that they have the interests of Nigeria and Nigerians at heart. I think the NSA had actually replied him, and he made it very clear that for now, he had not said anything about having any ambition, and that in the interest of their friendship, he would prefer not to say anything because of their mutual families that are involved. About the president, let's wait for his own response. He has that right to reply. But everyone who knows how things work in this country are aware that there is no minister that the National Assembly will just turn out like that. If the president wants the person, he will keep on submitting the names of the person. And we have historical antecedents to this. It was not El-Rufai's case. That was the first time that a nominee for ministerial position will actually be turned down. And don't forget, this was someone who had been a well-respected minister several years before his appearance in the National Assembly. So in my opinion, there was really nothing. He actually fit into the category of people who should take a bow and go, if you base it on his performance in the FCT. So it was obvious to at least a number of us who know how these type of things work, that the president really does not want him. If he had wanted him, he will always find his way to ensure that he was screened. So it was really not a secret.
Mr. We are just it's on that comment. It's on that statement as well. When people say if the president wanted him, he would have found his way. You know, people are just about applauding the 10 senators, the one that is exhibiting the separation of power, not rubber stamped as has been dubbed over the years. When we hear this narrative that if the president wanted him, he would have made it possible with or without the screening of the National Assembly, does it in some way undermine the separation of power ideology that we so much talk about?
Brian, let me leave Nigeria for a second. Let's go to the US.
Okay.
That used to be the bastion of democracy. They are more like the police of the conscience of every other nations in the world. What have you seen on the floor of the US Senate? The US Senate will come out and say, no, in the news, you hear so person is not qualified and all of that. There was a candidate they turned back. And the president, the following day, he said, no, they are going to clear him. I've spoken to them, and some of the gray areas have been ironed out. You have that. That's democracy at work. Democracy, and when you talk about separation of power,
Hello, Mr. Seun.
The proponent of separation of power is not talking about adversarial power. It's not talking about adversarial relationship between the three arms of government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. No, it's talking about independent, but how do I?
Well, it may seem that that connection is a little bit shaky there. But
Call it now. They are independent in their workings, but they work together for the interests of the entire. Many have suggested.
Now, talking about it politically and ahead of 2027, A news analyst or newspaper analyst was here in the studio with us yesterday talking about the president of the Nigerian Nexus. And one of the key comments he made was that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu might have just made a very grave mistake by not ensuring that a ministerial position is given to El-Rufai, or in other way, it was a mistake to have embarrassed Malam Nasser El-Rufai in the way that he was embarrassed at the floor of the Senate during that screening, and that El-Rufai will do all he can to ensure that even while still in the APC, they stabilize the party ahead of 2027. Is this the picture we are seeing on the board?
Chijoke, like I told you, we must not put ourselves, we must not let these politicians think we are a pawn in their chessboard. I think we are giving El-Rufai too much respect. He made it clear yesterday, he's really not a politician. He's not a politician, and many people really don't get that. This idea of he will make things difficult, he's dealing with politicians, and he's not being screened also tells you that he's not a politician. If he were to be a politician, the normal Nigerian politician, he would have found his way to ensure that he gets that. So I don't see him constituting a major hindrance to either the re-election of the president, or constituting any nuisance to his party, the APC, as it were today. Because the dynamics of the party is such that someone who is really not an out-and-out politician like him can really make all the noise. But when the chips are down to getting the votes in, politicians know what to do. Most times, people like El-Rufai, when it comes to mobilizing votes, he doesn't have what it takes. The election in Kaduna last time tells us that clearly. If you are talking about somebody like Wike and not allowing president to get something, I can say, yes, that's a correct analysis. But an El-Rufai, you will be surprised. They will muzzle him out on election day and get what they need to get. All he will do is go to TV studios and make all the noise again. He's not really the typical Nigerian politician.
Now let's talk about the APC, because we hear the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is supposed to preside over the National Caucus meeting today. And the APC is looking to get its house in order in terms of its Congress, and not forgetting its NEC meetings as well. What do you make of this development in line with house cleaning ahead of 2027?
It's long expected, and don't forget that was one of the major grounds that El-Rufai actually has with his party, the APC. They were supposed to hold caucus NEC meetings but since the president emerged, they only had the meeting once, and it was that meeting that hosted the former chairman Abdullahi Ademu and brought in what's his name? The incumbent, Dr. Umar Abdullahi Ganduje. It was just days to that meeting. They hosted him and they quickly called for NEC meeting so that they can ratify him, because that's their constitution. The NEC must ratify whosoever is brought in. So since then, they've postponed it severally. And so it's cheering news that finally today they'll be holding the caucus meeting, and tomorrow they will also be holding the NEC meeting. It's expected that far-reaching decisions will be taken, and some of the issues that seems to have divided the party will be discussed. But I need to tell people that they have to moderate their expectation. It's a caucus meeting for a reason. It's just interests of people or interests of regions that will be certified. They will just make sure that they satisfied interests of regions. But individuals who still have grounds, after the meeting, you will still see them going everywhere, making noise, because it's about caucus interests. It's not going to be about individual interests.
Well, let's hope that the resolutions of the APC, at the NEC meeting, and of course their Congress, holds the party together ahead of 2027 with other political parties, opposition parties already gearing up ahead of the general polls. It might appear that APC is probably sitting on a slab in an ocean filled with sharks at this point.
Uh, we expect that, except that the parties we have in Nigeria in the opposition don't seem to know the onerous expectation of Nigerians on them. Labour parties in tatters, PDP are not getting their acts right. And I really, in my opinion, don't think 2 years is enough time to pull a veritable thought force that can actually confront the incumbent APC dominance across the country. So many are expecting a shocker into 2027, but I'm not one of such people.
All right, many
Now
thanks.
let's move to Lagos before we let you go. Let's get your opinion on this matter. It's been developing as a story, and many say it would also characterize how the Governor Advisory Council, the role of the president, is in the performance of the Lagos State Assembly. Now, a panel was set up to give recommendations and also report back to the president. But this morning, the way the Punch newspaper captured it is that even Miranda might step down. I don't know if you've got the news on the developments as it unfolds in the Lagos State Assembly.
Yes, Brian, I got a hold, and I also spoke to insiders. The governor is from Central, the deputy governor is from East, and the speaker, Miranda, currently is also from Central. And the largest political bloc is actually the West. And so there is a major concern that the number 3 person must return back there, where the oyster speaker came from. So it's going to be, in the coming days, we might have a very interesting news from Lagos. So from what I learned, there is an arrangement for Miranda to resign and ensure that someone from that point, they actually wanted a woman, but the only lady from that senatorial district happens to be from the Labour Party. And of course, you know that will not work. So we might have, actually see a male from that senatorial district in the coming days, at least from the information I gathered.
Now, in terms of these resignations, we also hear that it's also no return for Obasa, as the Akande Panel is also saying that there's no way he would come back, vis-a-vis the resignation that we're also looking at in terms of what you said you've gathered for Miranda as well. How key is it? Are there any eligible names topping the recommendations from the West that might pick up this speakership position?
On my head now, I really can't give you names. But of course, you know, due to the towering status of Lagos State House of Assembly, one of the conditions is that the person can be a first-timer. So even without insider information, we can actually do some plus and minus and know who are in pole position to be able to get it from there. But like I said, I actually cannot give you. In fact, I learned that the president actually asked, is there a woman to replace Miranda from the senatorial district? So they now look at the people there. It was only a Labour Party person that was a woman that is from the place. So that means it's a man that will be taken over from Miranda if that arrangement by the GAC and other elders of the party, if it falls through, is a male, and the male can be a first-timer. It's just in the written code of the Lagos State House of Assembly rules.
Last week we had someone on the show who talked about the fact that we're getting sidetracked on the speakership battle. That one of the bills that also more or less played a role in Obasa's debacles was recommendations for the scrapping of the created 32 LGAs in Lagos under the then elsewhile governorship of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that the Lagos Assembly was supposed to begin public hearing on recommendations in line with the local government councils ahead of the local government elections as well. And he feels that this is a sponsored sidetrack exercise to get Lagosians off the main focus ahead of local government councils. I don't know if you make any sense of this allegations or what you'd like to say in that respect.
Well, there have been interests that I think that arrangement of community development LCDAs should be shoved aside, since the Constitution up to now had not given legal representation to new local government creation. And from the body language of both chambers of the National Assembly, they are not looking in that direction. But there is also a louder perspective. You need to go to Lagos and see the level of development that is actually going on because of these LCDAs. I've been privileged to visit a number of them, and I really don't think that level of development would have been possible if power were not devolved to those other places. On the other side, there were a number of states that copied that template of Lagos. Ekiti State, where I came from, for instance, is an example. Communities that have complained of being excluded from development. The Fayemi administration also created LCDAs, and it was instant. The impact were now being felt across the entire length and breadth of Ekiti State. So it's just that those are the type of conversations you have, and it's expected. You see people who just take radical approach, but I think the major or the predominant thinking in Lagos is that the LCDA had actually done more good than the other way around.
Well, another angle to it is the fact that a lot of persons are accusing, states like Lagos State that has the LCDA, particularly in Lagos now, of creating these LCDAs as a means of giving out to certain individuals. I mean, if you recall the issue with local government council areas and how the state governors decide to handpick certain individuals and hand them local government area councils to chair. And now with the LCDA, when talks came up, there were instances where certain individuals said, oh, if these LCDAs are scrapped, what do we do? How do we eat? Is this the situation? Should we continue to allow these LCDAs exist in Lagos, in as much as they are serving their purpose, but also having loopholes where people just sort of take from government coffers without proper checks and balances?
Brian, Chijoke, let me tell you the truth. That argument is neither here nor there. The existing local government, and I'm not just talking about Lagos, I'm talking about most of the local government in Nigeria, is what it is food for the boys. It's what it is. I know of local governments in certain parts of this country where activities are practically on lockdown until the next FAC allocation. The next FAC allocation, everyone gets back there, share the money after paying statutory salaries. Of course, the traditional institutions also draw their salaries from the place. Some health workers at the primary health centers, they draw their salary from local government, and teachers. So immediately they perform those statutory obligations. The remaining thing is how to share, all right? Political stalwart and all of that. That was the predominant thing in across the length and breadth of our country. And that's why some of us were very happy when the president put his feet on the ground, thanks to the Attorney General who took it to court and ensured that the local government can now be cut from the apron string of the governors. For me, what that decision will do for Nigeria is that those of us in the media, those of us in the civil society space, we can now begin to make scapegoats of people who have been elected, whether you say governors pick them to be elected, but they have been elected. So it is now our duty. If the moment we can scapegoat 2, 3, who just collect that type of money there is nothing that can be pointed to, distributed the money, and we go through the whole hall of the legal process, and eventually they are put behind bar because the court had now seen that they have misappropriated public funds. Other people will sit tight. I've always said this. The reason why a crime will be perpetrated for long or for as long is if there are no consequences for a crime done. When there are consequences, if we now begin to hear that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 local government chairmen or councillors are now behind bar, maybe 7, 10 years jail term because of their carelessness and their mishandling of local government funds, you will see what we need to do.
Well, timely calls and very important calls here, Mr. Seun Oni, and let's hope that the local government council chairman don't divert these funds or misuse the funds as the case has always been. But let's also talk about the governors who have decided that the allocations coming in from FAC to the local government areas are their birthright, and they can decide to do what they want to do with it while handing down peanuts to the local government council chairmen who are their boys. They enjoy immunity, but how many governors can be prosecuted all at once when they leave office at this point, as earlier threatened by the Attorney General of the Federation?
Well, that's an issue for another day, because the immunity clause has been another very contentious issue, whether we should still keep this clause in our constitution. But I think from the general temperature of the House and the two chambers, we will not see the immunity clause removed anytime soon. Having said that, the governors, the deputies have immunity clause, but chairmen, councillors at the local government don't have immunity clause. So if you take your local government money and hand it over to someone with immunity, you go to jail. So others will learn lesson not to hand over their resources to people. They will be the one to come out screaming, governor has immunity, but he wants to collect money from me, and I'm the one that will go to jail eventually. You begin to hear those type of
whistle blowing from the local government council chairman.
Yes, we saw that in Ogun State at some point. A local government, he was ousted anyway, but it's good that at least he cleared his conscience. I'm beginning to see pressure from the governor, insisting that I should bring resources that belong to the local government. And he screamed over the rooftop. Now, the reason why he looks like a lone voice is that it's still the norm for local government chairmen to hand over the resources of their local government to their governors. But it's going to be an exception when we begin to see consequence. And the only way we can see consequence is that those of us in the media, those of us in the civil society space, we must begin to put equal searchlight, the same searchlight we put there.
Okay. Yeah, carry on. I think your connection just went off a little bit there. I didn't get your last point.
Okay, I said the same searchlight that those of us in the media, those of us in the local, in the civil society space, that we put on the federal government, the ministers and the rest of them, we must now be intentional in the way we now spotlight activities in the local government level. So that way, we will call the attention of the anti-corruption agencies like ICPC, EFCC, to activities at that third tier of our government. And so when we have succeeded in scapegoating 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chairmen, others will sit tight. So handing over the resources, the purse, the account.
Well, Mr. Sharon, let's go back to the Lagos State speakership issue so we don't deviate for too long. To wrap up the conversation, we all know that Princess Miranda came into the position of Speaker at the Lagos State House of Assembly via the ousting of Speaker Obasa, and not necessarily by election, by members of the House. And she therefore made history as the first ever female Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly. If eventually Miranda is taken out, and perhaps Obasa or any other male member of the House takes center stage as the Speaker, what does this do for this continued fight for equality of rights amongst all individuals, irrespective of gender? Hello, Mr. Seun. Well, it appears that. Hello, Mr. Seun, can you still hear me? Well, while we wait for that connection to buffer and have Mr. Seun Oni back on the line, Bito. Hello, Mr. Seun. Are you back on the line?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry,
Did you get my question about Princess Miranda and making history as the first ever female Speaker of the House of Assembly in Lagos State?
Yes, but I did not get the later part.
Well, I was asking if eventually Princess Miranda is taken out and Obasa or any other male member of the House takes over as the Speaker, what does this do for this continued fight for equality of rights and positions also amongst every single Nigerian, irrespective of their agenda?
I'm an inclusivity advocate, but I think the idea of inclusivity must also not be mistaken for just handing things to women because they are women. Miranda came in from hindsight now. It shows that there was a major level of trust that the people actually had on Miranda. Bear in mind that she was not from the senatorial district that Obasa came from. I know instances where a speaker was ousted. I can actually cite Nasarawa here. The last time a speaker was ousted there, the deputy also was told to resign. He was not involved, but they just told him, you have to resign. We are bringing somebody else. The fact that virtually every other member of Lagos State House of Assembly queued behind Miranda clearly shows that she has capacity to get that job done. But in this case, we have a political arrangement, and that political arrangement in the coming days, if it will require her to resign from that position for equity, I think there's really nothing wrong about that. My thinking is that the number two, somebody who will be taken up as the deputy speaker, probably also they must also be conscious enough to ensure that the person is a qualified female, to ensure that there is that level of representation of women at the highest level. By the way, Lagos is an exemplary state until it's still for the purpose of equity and inclusion. For a number of time, Lagos had always had female deputy governors. If you want to talk about Bokna Akirele, you want to talk about the woman who is in Senate now, the senator, the former deputy is in Senate now, and a number of people. Orelope Adefuleri was the deputy governor of what's his name now? Raji Babatunde Raji.
Yeah.
Fashola?
Yes, Fashola, Raji Fashola. The deputy of Ambode was also a woman. She's in the Senate now. Is the one I'm trying to remember her name now. She was a female. So it was Ambode's coming that brought the incumbent now, the incumbent deputy governor that is a male. And so Lagos has been exemplary when it comes to women inclusion. So, but for equity, like we heard, if Miranda has to go for equity, and so that the agitation from that part of the state is also considered, I think is the right thing to do when it comes to politics.
Now, one more subject in the news before we allow you to take your break. We'll go to Ondo State. Yesterday, we saw the swearing-in ceremony as Governor Lucky Orimiyesan Ayedatiwa became the 7th governor of Ondo State. More importantly was the statement he made following his swearing-in as he paid tribute to the late governor and also pledged continuity in governance. What do you make of that ceremony yesterday in Akure?
Well, it was a serene and also solemn event. Serene due to the ambience of the day, solemn because of the nostalgia of the loss of his former principal and former governor of the state. The last time he was on the podium with the late Akeredolu SAN, I still could recollect that Akeredolu actually waxed prophetic, and he did say that day that he is now old and is leaving the stage, and somebody like Lucky will have to take over from where he has started. So I said it was solemn because that prophecy by Akeredolu was fulfilled. He was now taking over to wrap up the good job that they started together. Ondo State are in for another 4 years of Orimiyesan Lucky Ayedatiwa, and we just hope that some of the tumultuous period he had in the past few years that he's been in the saddle will be a thing of the past. He must learn how to work with even seeming contrary opinions or schools of thought. He must ensure that the progress, the development of Ondo State comes first, and he must also ensure that the trust that was imposed in him by the electorate in Ondo State is well rewarded. He had changed from the former policy trust of his late boss, and he said he's going for our ease. Though the our ease is a bit very ambitious, very bogus, but I'm hoping that in the coming days he will be able to prove some of us wrong, that he knows what he's doing and is able to leave a legacy of good governance for the people of Ondo State.
Now, Mr. Seun, one of the major things that Governor Lucky Ayedatiwa had done, following his inauguration as the 7th governor of Ondo State, was to pardon 43 inmates, 7 jail terms across several, correctional facilities in the state. How much of an exciting news is this, especially for families of these individuals that have just been pardoned by the governor? And is this a practice for governors across the nation to pardon certain inmates, especially during occasions of their inauguration?
He's becoming almost the norm. Of course, you could recollect that the same thing happened when Osun State Governor also was marking his I think 2nd year in office or thereabout. He pardoned some people. There were also cries that other names should be included. So it's becoming the norm. I think it's going to be a cheering news for the families of those people, but also it's also going to be Um, when you bear also in mind what we call prison congestion, that has been a major topic in the length and breadth of the country, that there are some people who really don't need to serve jail term, maybe some other correctional approaches like we have seen in other crimes. It might be community service where you deploy them to do some other things rather than just being locked behind bar. We are feeding them and things like that. So those are some of the things we need to look at in our correctional service sector as a country. So,
Well, there were calls also made to the governor by certain individuals to, renovate or rehabilitate the Akure Township Stadium, which has been lying dormant for many years. Now, this is not the first state or the only state in the country that has had a dormant stadium. Many states across the country usually have stadiums that either past governors started a project and then abandoned, or the stadiums are just dilapidated and not up to date. Uh, do you think this is something that the governor might be considering, especially in line with promoting youth and sports development?
well, the last statement you made, Chiyoke, will be the one I will use to explain the question you have asked me. For me as a person, I still find it very curious
Yeah.
why virtually all governors in Nigeria have not prioritized sport as a tool for youth development and employment generation. I really, I can't put my head around why they've not been able to do that. So I will only advise the governor, who has 4 years, beginning from yesterday, he should look for people who have who can add value, especially when it comes to that sports sector. Of course, Ondo State has a football team, male, female. They are known to be powerhouse in handball several years ago. And there are several things that can be done. I've been to that stadium, and I know even at that time, I'm talking about around 1990, 95, 96,
Yeah.
it was a carcass, a shadow of itself. It's not any serious stadium. So I just imagine what it will look like today. So he must ensure that he brings on. It's not just about renovating the stadium. It's about now taking sport as a business to better the population of the youth of Ondo State and also generate employment and revenue for Ondo State as a state.
All right. Vito?
Well, we must thank you, Mr. Seun Oni, for taking our time to graciously look at these issues in the news. We appreciate you for your insights and objectivity.
It's always a pleasure being on ADB, and thank you for having me again today.
Well, then, enjoy the rest of your day.
And you too. Thank you.